Thanks everybody for coming today.
Mm-hmm.
This is on a random, uh, random evening. This is, AHOY Comics. They've starting to put out more and more stuff that I've been really excited about. Anyway, it's cool that Jordan reached out to us to do this, and then we've got our old pal Julian, also cartoonist. We got ants up here. I don't know if you noticed. I got some more ants back there.
Older ants.
Yeah. Anyway, but Julian going to be moderating the discussion, and you can take it away, I guess. Turn on the music. Here you go.
Hello, Jordan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
We've already been talking for half an hour. I've
Start over.
Yeah, I see. I started from the beginning. Known Jordan
Nope, you're good.
before the pandemic, like right before, maybe like
Yes.
2019 or so.
Yeah.
Live in the region, good old DMV region. This is his new comic book, Ancestral Recall from AHOY Comics. When I first met him, you were doing comic books it was Aquaman for DC Comics.
Mm-hmm.
And then you did some Vampirella work. Was it Vampirella?
Red Sonja, yeah.
Red Sonja? I thought you did some Vampirella too.
You know, they're
Wasn't it like a
they're
vampy
close.
thing?
There was like a demon one.
Demon one, okay.
Yeah.
See, I get the back rows. That and that new Red Sonja movie is trash, so it kind of...
We don't talk about it.
Exactly. See, you messed my brain up on all Red Sonja. So you've had a pretty decent career so far within comics. A known writer.
Yeah. I hope so.
So, what was the impetus for creating Ancestral Recall?
So I was lucky enough to be part of the Milestone Initiative, which was a group at DC Comics that was brought in to do like a different kind of initiative, because I'd done writer and artist initiatives before, but this one was specifically for Milestone, and they were starting to like relaunch stuff. Dennis was there, Reggie was there, and they wanted to bring in like another generation of writers and artists. So I was lucky enough to be part of that, and while I was there, we did a lot of different things in terms of like, just again talking about old Milestone stuff, and then doing some workshop stuff, and in one of the workshops we got to create like new characters, and so they were like, make a hero and make a villain. And so it was groups of 4, and they chose one hero and one villain from each group. I made a villain that they ended up going with, but my hero was basically the prototype for Melvin, the hero of this book. And I was thinking a lot just being in that environment of like what Milestone was, like what that meant to people, and like what those stories and those characters were, because that was... I don't know if we've had Milestone again. Like, we had Milestone again. Like, they brought it back twice. But, like, just that moment of, like, here is a publisher, even when it was, like, new and separated from DC, that's, like, doing stories that aren't what you're seeing in the mainstream, aren't what you're seeing in, like, big 2 superhero comics, and, like, doing things to such an extent that they were, like, you gotta stop. Like, Dwayne McDuffie was, like... very like contentious with editorial, because I think a lot of the things they were doing were it was ahead of its time. Like, I think if they did any of those stories today, like, it would be like, we've done worse, we've done crazier things, but I wanted to do something that was in that vein. And so I was thinking a lot about what kind of story I would like to tell, specifically if it was like my own story, like devoid from a lot of the other stuff that I'd done before. And this really spoke to me, just the idea of like Black history as a power and as like a superpower, because I feel like for me, I'll read just historical text and like look at things that people have done and be like, damn, like that's not directly me, like we're not related, but like that is me in terms of like, struggle and like being able to overcome and do things that I feel like when you just think about the day-to-day of Black people, and not even just people go back to the 60s and think about like, wow, like what a time. But it was like the 1900s, the 1800s, you know what I mean? Like even before then, where it's just like to exist and still find joy and community and like all of that, and endure. Like you didn't have to be like a famous inventor or like somebody who did some big historical thing. Like if you just lived through the times, like, you were doing something that was aspirational. So, like, I find that to be something that powers me, and turning it into a literal superpower of being able to, like, highlight historical figures, I think was something that I really wanted to figure out the best way that we could try to do it, and I think we did it. Like, I think this book really speaks to a lot of that stuff.
Okay. How did you meet Atagun Ilhan?
Atagun was part of.
Okay.
He was part of the Milestone group, and he was part of my group that we were doing the exercise with, and like watching him, we would all come together and they had us there like all day. Like, we were at DC headquarters and we were there from like 9 to 8, just like doing stuff all day. And so like during the breaks, I would just see him like sketching, and I would be like, man, if we could work together, like, that would be great, because like all of that stuff looks amazing. And then like immediately after we got out of there, he was doing Poison Ivy with G. Willow Wilson. He did a few like things for that, and then he was doing some of the was it Icon? I think he got like some backup work in that. So like they had him working like immediately after. So I was like, man, I don't know. But when we got to pitching the book to Ahoy, he was finishing his MFA at Syracuse.
He was still in school then?
Yeah. And he was with like Tom Pyre, who is one of the editors-in-chiefs at Ahoy, was also connected to Syracuse. So he was like, oh, I already know Tom. And I was like, this is like synergy. Like, we're already both on opposite sides of this coming in. So like, it was very fortunate that like, not only did I already know him, we already had this connection, but like to do my first like creator-owned book with somebody who I was already like anticipating working with, hoping to work with, and you can just see in the pages like what he's able to do. And now he's like, I don't know if they've announced this yet, so like but he's like doing Batman with Matt Fraction. Like, he's got a few things in there, so like he's going up. So like the fact that I got him
now.
you know, was like, wow. You know, I wasn't even thinking that far ahead in terms of like, I knew he was gonna be, you know, major, but I didn't think A, it would happen that quick, but B, like, you know, coinciding with the book that we're doing. Like, it feels very cool that I'm able to be collaborating with him now, as he's kind of ascending.
Yeah. How much did you guys actually collaborate on the characters, the setting, and how did you want to portray the world? Like, how much of a conversation did you have about figuring that out from your perspective as writing and his perspective of designing it and visualizing these ideas?
Yeah, we talked a lot in the beginning, just because I feel like as a writer, my job is to give the artist as much as they want, you know, up front. I feel like some artists are like, tell me everything, like send me all the references, like do all this stuff so I like can visualize it and see it. Some of them are like, just like give me a taste of it, give me a hint of it, and like leave me room to create. Because like when you look at an Alan Moore script, it's like there's no space. It's like literally do this verbatim, you know,
20 pages on one page.
And I always like to leave space, not just for my collaborators to, you know, put their own take on it, but like the reason I'm working with somebody is because I like what you do, right? And so like my job isn't to tell you what to do, it's to give you the map of like what the story is going to be, and then let you fill in, you know, those blank spaces. So we did a lot of talk about just like what I was seeing visually in my mind with these characters, and I sent him like references and you know, just a little bit of like how I thought it could look, but I also left a lot of interpretation for him to go in and do what he wanted to do. And I take an improv approach to it, so it's more of a yes and situation than like don't do that. You know what I mean? Like if he brings an idea, I'm like, okay, you know, that wasn't my initial thought, but I see what you're talking about, and we can make it work this way. You know what I mean? Instead of being like just cold every, you know, thing that he was trying to tell me. It's like, don't do that. Because I want you to feel empowered, you know, working on a project with me, but I also want you to feel like this is your book as well. Like I never wanted to feel like, even though I'm the writer, it's like you know, it may have been my idea, but like we're doing it together. So I want him to feel like he has enough space to do certain things. So even in here, like you see Petunia the panda, that wasn't in the script. He just put that in there, and I was like, this is great. Like let's run with this. Let's make this a bigger and bigger thing as we go on. And I think that's the mark of a good collaboration, is that both people are invested in the story that they're doing, but also like aren't stepping on each other, but more like, you know, complimenting each other and what they do.
So, for the people who's listening to this and probably will be watching this, what is the quick synopsis of what Ancestral Recall is about?
I guess the quickest pitch is it follows Melvin Waring, who is a eccentric, kind of reclusive painter who is able to tap into the literal power of Black history. So he's able to communicate with historical figures and use their skills or knowledge, you know, whatever situation he's in. So in this first issue, there's a situation where he needs to sword fight. So like he taps into Jean-Louis Michel, who's the greatest sword fighter, you know, maybe ever, but of like the 17th century. Other issues he taps into, you know, inventors and different people. But the overall arc is he's trying to reunite with his wife, who is taken by a sentient AI corporation from the future. So it's a love story, it's science fiction, it's historical, and we're kind of trying to merge all of those things together into one.
So, why make Melvin an artist?
I think a lot about Black art and its place in society, in the sense of like, it was such a small part of the movie, but did you see the new Candyman movie?
Mm-hmm.
So like part of that was like they were, I don't know what happened. It felt like they were trying to have a conversation about like Black art and
They
like
were, yeah.
what it means to be an artist, because I think a lot of the times what happens, no matter what art you're participating in, whether you're a filmmaker, whether you're a writer, whether you are a you know, painter, like it's a bit of that Du Bois double consciousness, right? Like you're creating something specifically for Black people or for yourself, right? But like there's the dominant culture, which is always going to either attach itself to it or like make demands on it, right? So like if you think about jazz in specific, right? Like jazz was not, it wasn't even that it wasn't made for white people, but like it was in direct response to us not being able to have access to certain spaces. And so like we made a music, we made a place to celebrate, we made something to do. All of a sudden, everybody in Manhattan is like, what's that?
Yeah.
Can we have that? Can we do that? Can we go to Harlem? You can't come down here, but can we come up there and like see what's going on over there?
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's always that balance where I think about even like a Louis Armstrong, who was like arguably the most famous man in America and like couldn't stay at a hotel. You know, like it's crazy, like that double standard of like wanting to consume the art and like have the art, but not responding to what the art's trying to tell you. And so I felt like Melvin was a good representation of that, of somebody who's trying to search for how he can express himself and get in contact with, you know, a lot of the things that inspired him. But at the same time, in issue 3 is coming out next week. Issue 4 comes out in November, but I think there's a big part of issue 4 where he's kind of like grappling with that and struggling with that. And I really wanted to make that a bigger part of the story, at least in terms of like making sure that that conversation is had about just how a lot of the times Black artists have to kind of navigate those spaces in a way that maybe isn't always something that we can see and observe, you know, like from, you know, just like up front, but like it's always an internal conversation. And I think with a lot of like different Black creatives I've spoken with, like it's something that is always like in the back of their mind of like, if I want to you know, make art, I can make art, but if I want to be successful at it, right, like you saw basically what happened to Basquiat, like if I want to make this my career, like there's a price to pay that I'm going to have to either be comfortable with, or maybe it's going to drive me a little bit crazy. So
Yeah. I also like the fact that you have that Melvin is completely out of sorts from the beginning all the way up into what I've read in issue 3. He still's like, I gotta save my wife, but I don't know what I'm doing.
yeah.
So what was interesting about you having not only Melvin be completely out of sorts, trying to figure this out, trying to figure out these powers. But in a way, you also have his wife, June, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who always has it all together.
Yeah.
As she also navigates being taken by the sentient AI. Like, what went into wanting to make that type of pairing of the story?
Yeah.
And not just having her be a damsel either.
So there was two different things. One, initially, this is I'm just too much of a nerd sometimes. I really liked the 52 DC event series, and at the end of that, there's a little tease where it's like Elongated Man and his wife are both dead, but now they're like ghost detectives, and then they like never did anything with that. And I was like, I like the idea of that. And Melvin and June are based on Thelonious Monk and his wife Nellie, right? And so like Thelonious Monk is famously like a musical genius, and like that's it. Like he had, nobody knows exactly what he had, but like you could say he was bipolar, he had some kind of obsessive compulsive disorder, he had like, you know, something else.
He was something.
Yeah. And like was just like they would try to interview him and he was like completely nonverbal. Like he wouldn't speak to people, or he would kind of mumble some stuff. And so like his wife Nellie was always there to either like prod him to like answer the question, or like he couldn't get through airports by himself, so she had to like guide him through. Like he was not going to collect the money at the end of the show, so like she had to be there to do that. And so I liked kind of that relationship that they had. But then I was like, I can't kill June, right? Like she can't be a ghost, because that's like not only just like fridging her off the bat, but like the least interesting way to approach that. But I did want to separate them in a way that was like really pushing Melvin in those directions, right? Because like he's got a goal to do, but he's not able to do it in the way that you know would normally think. Like the protagonist is just gonna rush to the rescue. Like he's often confused, often distracted, like not necessarily knowing where he's going, like you're saying, most of the time, but like he knows he's got to get somewhere. And June on the other side of it is like, you know, again, she's the practical one. She's got all the plans. She knows what she's supposed to be doing, but she's also faced with a situation that she's not in control of. And so kind of trying to place them both in these uncomfortable positions as they kind of work their way back to each other.
What's up with Miriam while she's there?
Melvin needs somebody to help guide him, but it's also like, who's the worst person to do that, all right? Like, who's like the opposite of him? So Mirren is his teenage neighbor who's like, or Melvin is very like in his own inner world and living in his own head and like not talking to people, doesn't like talking to people. Like she's an extreme extrovert. She wants to talk about everything, every thought that's going through her head. And it's like, who's somebody that Melvin will have to depend on, but it's like gonna drive him crazy. But as they go along, you see them kind of start to appreciate each other more, because I think Melvin really does like her. He just doesn't know how to interact with people. Like he doesn't know how to form those bonds and relationships. So he's kind of forced to figure out how to be, maybe not necessarily like a father figure to her, but like a mentor. Like she definitely looks up to him, and like he isn't always the most responsive or like best person to do that to, but like he's trying and she's trying. So I thought it was a good way to kind of like put him with somebody. She's kind of like his girl Friday, but again, like just the most extreme version of that. So like they're kind of working through this adventure together.
And you brought up the evil AI corporation. I know currently AI is a term that turns people off.
Depends on who you're talking to. Some people.
It's evil. Yeah, but it's also not a new concept.
No.
What was it come up with something in this vein that it taps into current fears that's also different from all the other versions of evil robot computers? Like, you know, we're 40 years post Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
We're 25 or 26 years post The Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
You know, video games only killed 11,000 robots.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was an interesting take so far from what I know. I'm reading the books like the rest of the people in terms of essentially a tech bro being involved.
Yeah.
What inspired, I guess you say, not only the setup for that and how things look in the weird, evil, dystopian future?
The one thing about working on this book is we started doing this like 4 years ago, you know, and like every step of the way I've been like, did we do something wrong? Because like more stuff keeps happening that literally we made Petunia the panda, and then maybe like 2 months ago I saw AI advertisements about like a robotic panda that you could buy. Like the AI ad was bullshit because it was like making it look like it's a real panda and it's obviously not, and then you get it and it's like a Temu whatever, but it's like selling the idea that I was like, did we do that? Because that's not good. Like I
like
wish we
steal
did
your
something
idea.
else. Yeah.
They like steal your idea from the ether or something.
Yeah, but I mean, both in like the idea of you know, the power of Black history, and then like the inverse of reality, where it's like DI woke, et cetera, like cracking down on that. You know, at the time that I started writing it, like AI was like a thing that people were talking about, but it wasn't like everything, right? Like it wasn't like there wasn't AI McDonald's or like, you know, all the stuff that they're trying to sell you now, where it's like, why, what? But I recently finished this book called Empire of AI.
Yes.
Have you read that?
I watched every interview that she's done about it. Haven't had
Okay.
time to sit down and crack into it. But she got energy for them.
It's a crazy book. It's a book, basically, this journalist, Karen Howe, like embedded herself into OpenAI and was like at the ground level with Sam Altman and all of them as they were like doing all this stuff. And it's wild how these people are so out of touch with everything that's going on, but B, have like so much power and like so much money, and like even
when people try to stop them, they push them out of the way.
Yeah.
They're trying to make God.
well,
It's the time they really say we're trying to make a God.
it's
I'm
wild.
like, that goes bad. Like
Well-
I've watched enough movies. I read enough comic books. You can't go around trying to make a God.
Well, it's wild because like so the ethos became scale, right? Like they kept talking about, well, it's got to be bigger, it's got to be more. We have to like keep doing it. So like I know even here locally, like in PG County, they were going to build a super data center, and like thankfully enough people came together and said, don't do that, because in Memphis, where Elon Musk built his super data center, like people are getting cancer at a disastrous rate because like
There's too many black people with money in PG County.
yeah. Well, that's
Like literally, like
yeah.
there's black millionaires there. It's like, nah, you ain't poisoning me.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, if you read the book, so much of it is like how these people have basically figured out the secret to like, okay, we got, because it's not just, it's OpenAI, but it's also Google and it's also Microsoft and it's also all of these places who are like, we figured out how to really like accelerate and take advantage of the most vulnerable communities, and like we know nobody's going to say anything about that, so like or if they're going to say it, they're not going to say it to us. Like they're not going to say it to me, Bill Gates, you know, they're going to say that to somebody else. And so like I didn't even, if I could write this book again, like I think I would have gone harder knowing what I know now.
They've gotten eviler since you started writing this comic book.
But the whole idea of the sentient AI was like, well, say like Amazon was a sentient company, right? Like
Feels like that now every time they send me notifications about things I didn't even care about.
well, but it's like what would a sentient AI corporation's job be? Right? It would be to make the most money possible. Like how can I up every quarter, every week, like how can I make more money? And part of it would be like be unethical as possible, right? But then also figure out ways that like we can make every single interaction that you have like a transaction. Like we're trying to get as much money out of you as possible, right? And so you know, having that be like the ultimate bad guy villain, I was like, I want it to be something that's not, because in issue 5, like Melvin is having a showdown with it, and it's just like nobody cares, right? Like as long as you get that package by 2 p.m., nobody's going to say anything about it. Nobody really cares about what went into doing that. You know, it's just like you need to get what you want to get, and because we live in such an age of instant gratification, like the quicker we can get it, the faster you can get it, the more stuff that you can get. You know what I mean? Like people aren't going to really complain about it because we all, in the back of everybody's mind, like we know, right? Like we know where all of this stuff is coming from, but there's that level of complacency where it's kind of like once it's too late, or once you feel like they've made you feel like, because that's the other thing about AI, right? They keep saying it's inevitable. They keep using that word in the way that it's like, what are you going to do about it, right? Like you should just stop talking about it and just like let us do it to you. But like nothing, it's not, AI isn't like the internet's coming to life, and like if we don't hurry up and like beat it to the punch, like we're not going to be able to stop it. We're doing it. We can stop it whenever we want to, but like people have decided there's so much money in this that they don't want to. So when you kind of balance it with that, it's I think it is the antithesis, right? So like if black culture or culture in general is like what we're discussing, like what would be the antithesis of that, right? It would be artificial intelligence. It would be this thing that just consumes everything and turns it into a commodity. So that was kind of my general idea. Again, knowing what I know now, I think I would have.
Even a little different. Yeah.
I like the story would mostly be the same, but I think I would have come down even harder than I did on it. But I think that's where my mind was at that time of just like, you know, how can what would be Melvin's greatest nemesis? It would be something that tries to take everything that he is and turn it into just like, you know, something you buy at the airport, you know, on your way to your next destination.
Okay. What was it like trying to pitch this book?
It was it was interesting. I don't know if you know Darren Bennett, who does Ant World Design, a bunch of the lettering, but like he was working at AHOY at the time, and me and him had talked a couple of times, but I saw him at C2E2. He was just at the AHOY booth, and I was chatting with him about like some of the stuff they had going on. He was like, if you ever have anything, like let me know about it. And I had a third of an idea, and I was like, yeah, I got it. Let's give me a week and I'll give you like, you know, a pitch or something. And so like I ran home and just like scrambled and like put something together. But he sent it up and they were like, this is great, like let's do this. So it was actually not that much of a challenge. I think, you know, having come off like this was me just coming off of the Milestone Initiative summit. So it was like, you know, I had some more juice, you know, just in terms of like trying to get something pitched. But I think, you know, I thank Darren because I think he is, you know, somebody who's kind of like an unsung person in the industry and like really wants to advocate and push for different people to get opportunities. And I think AHOY is also like the perfect place to do a book like this, just because they maybe do like a handful of books in a year, but like every book they do, they put 100% behind the book. You know what I mean? So like when it's your turn, like you got the whole publisher behind you, instead of situations where like maybe there's like 6 or 7 books coming out alongside your book each week from the publisher. You know what I mean? And it's like after you get past issue 1, they're kind of like, good luck. Keep going, you know. And I think right now from AHOY, it's like me, Mark Russell has a book coming out next month, and then they're launching another series next month that's going to pick up, like this is ending in December, so they have something that's starting up in November to kind of like keep things in stores, but like they're not pumping out like 20 books a month. So I think it was great to work with them in terms of having a place that felt like it was really behind the thing that you're trying to do, specifically because it's my first creator-owned book. So like wanting to be in a place where like I feel like they're taking me seriously and like they want me to succeed, instead of a place that's like happy to have me, but also like, you know, I'm another name on the yeah.
How do you feel about the way the book has been what's the word I'm looking for, accepted, like the way people responded to the work?
It's interesting. So like when this was coming out, I think Bitterroot was ending. I think that like the last issue of that was coming out, and there was a lot of people who didn't know this book was coming out. There was a handful of people that did know this book was coming out, and I think there was like a convergence where like I went to San Diego Comic-Con. I was like talking about it with people, and the book was coming out the week after San Diego, and just walking around, like at least 3 or 4 comic shop owners came up to me and were like, "Are you Jordan Clark? Like, we're ready for Ancestral Recall." And I was like, "I didn't even think you knew who I was." Like, like you recognized me by my face, you know, which is like, wow, okay. There was like a retailers kind of like summit thing at San Diego, and like after I did my quick pitch, like a bunch of shops came up and they're like, "Can you come to our shop? Like, we would love you to come and like, talk about this book with us." So I feel like there's definitely been a really good reception. I think with all things non-Big Two, like you're kind of fighting for the shelf space and like to get into people's field of vision. But what I've more or less relied on is word of mouth. You know what I mean? It's like I feel like when you talk about social media and other things, like that's cool, and certainly like people do respond to that, but like somebody who works at your local shop or a friend of yours that you trust, like if they say, "Hey, have you read this?" You know what I mean? Like that goes a long way, to people being like, "Oh, I feel like I'm behind now. I feel like I don't know about this. How many issues are there? Like, let me run and catch up on that." Especially doing like single issues, because I think it's not even necessarily that it's easier to sell the trade, but like the trade has more reach in that way, where like it's easier to sell somebody on a collected edition than it is to say, "Here's issue 3," like jump in on that. But so far I think it really has been great in terms of the way that people have responded to it, and even like having conversations with people who have read the book. It's been really interesting, because I think that's the thing about art. Once you create something, like it means something to you and like it's in your head, but when you share it with other people, they come back and they say, "Hey, this reminded me of," and you're like, "I wasn't even thinking about that." Like in the next issue, my editor Sarah put a letter in the front from somebody who wrote in that was basically like describing how they relate to Melvin, because like they're in the early stages of Alzheimer's, and like their wife is like very much like helping them and like taking care of them. And I didn't necessarily write Melvin with like being somebody suffering with Alzheimer's like in mind. Like I just wrote him as like a very disorganized artist with like a busy inner life who like maybe doesn't like to talk to people too much. But the fact that like spoke to somebody directly, and then they came back and were like, "This means something to me," is like that means something to me, as the writer, because that means that people are making a connection that's deeper than just like, "This was good and I liked it." It's like, this is speaking to me directly as a person, and now I value this more than like just enjoying the story. So I'm hoping as things go on, we've got 3 more issues counting next week's issue, that people continue to just kind of like rally around it.
What was the reason in picking the historical figures you picked to focus on for the skills he acquires through tapping into history, versus, let's say, picking the ones that I guess everybody would kind of just like name check on the top of the head?
I think that was part of the challenge and the fun of working on it, is like, when you think about Black history, like there's the same names that kind of come to everybody's mind and the same people that we learn about in school. But there's so much, like I had to cut down like pretty far just in terms of all of the research that I did. One, because like, not everything would have worked in particular situations, but 2, just like if the book was like just jumping from thing to thing to thing, like there wouldn't be any space for a story. So like I really wanted to focus it in on just a handful of people, but stories and people that are like really interesting. Like Cheryl Linn Glass is in the second issue. She's the first black woman race car driver, and like she was good. Like she wasn't just like like a woman who drove, like twice and then like never got in the car again. Like she was like one of the best. Like she would have been, if she didn't unfortunately pass away early, like she would have been Danica Patrick. Like she probably would have gotten to like a NASCAR. There's people like I mentioned, like Jean-Louis Michel was like a Haitian soldier that was such a good fencer that like Napoleon was like, you need to be in the French army. Like I need you to be like part of my team. And so there's so many stories that I think if we just think about Black history as like slavery, civil rights, Barack Obama, you know what I mean? Then it's just like, well, there's a big gap there where like a lot of things happen and there's a lot of people. And like, like I said, not all of those people are like people who did like the most amazing thing ever, right? But I think they're still important to know about, and there's still important stories and things that we can take from there. So I really tried my best to find people who, fit what Melvin needed to do at the time. If he needed to ride a horse, if he needed to, know martial arts, if he needed to, hack into, some kind of database, like finding people that fit those parameters, but also finding people who weren't just like the first Google search that came up, like trying to go a bit deeper than that. So that when you come away from it, you're like, I need to know more about that. Like, Sammy Marlowe is one of the first people that you meet, and everybody who read the book was like, I didn't know who that was. Like, Sammy Marlowe is the inspiration behind Philip Marlowe and also Sam Spade, and he's like a real detective who like was doing like Hollywood stuff, like in the 1930s as like a Jamaican man in Los Angeles, which is crazy. Like, that he was able to get into those spaces, and like they sent him to like recover Hollywood stars from like wherever they had gotten drunk and like disappeared to. So it's like, it's crazy that like that was his job, right? And like nobody.
He was Ray Donovan before Ray Donovan.
But like a lot of people are like, I didn't even know that was a real person, and like I feel like that's a big part of what I was trying to do, is like help people make those connections. So like, the book isn't here's 20 pages of like this person's life, but it's like, here's a little snippet of that. Now you can take that and like continue your own research outside of the book.
Why 5 issues?
That's what AHOY.
That's what they gave you? Okay. I didn't know if it was a specific, if that was a choice, or if you could go like 6 or 8 or whatever.
No, but it felt right. I didn't hear that and was like, oh shit, all right, how am I gonna do this? I was like, all right, that's like not even just like a decent number, but it feels like enough space to tell a complete story. But we leave it open ended enough that like if there are, these sales were good and like we really like this book, like we want to do more, like there's enough space to continue the story, but it also wraps up. I mean, that's one of the things. I know comics is a space where like you never really know what's going to happen. Like I'm still waiting for the next issue of Black Monday Murders. Like I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
I gave up on that book many moons ago.
Like stuff like that where it's just like, oh, it's over. I'm never gonna. Okay, like I didn't want to do something where it's just like.
I don't even think that book had an ending. I just think it just stopped coming out.
But yeah, like this series finishes and there's like an ending to it, but then in a way that if AHOY or other people are like, we want to do more of that, we can certainly continue.
Do you feel that the Milestone Initiative was good for you?
Yeah, I think it was good. I think it was good for comics in general. If you look at me, if you look at Morgan Hampton, who's working on Green Lantern, if you look at Julio Anta, who did Blue Beetle and like a bunch of other YA stuff, Ashley Allen is doing Magic right now. Charles Stewart has done like a couple of different like DC and Marvel anthologies. Greg Burnham is still doing stuff. Who else? I mean, obviously Atagun, was doing a bunch of stuff. So I feel like of our group, like so many of us have gone on to like do stuff, like not just like here's this or that. Like Damon Hampton right now is doing the Superman, or I guess the Superboy vertical DC Go story.
Okay.
So like there's a lot of us have gotten in, to those places and like been able to like do stuff for DC and Marvel, but also like our own things. And so I feel like, it's one of those things where obviously DC put a lot of resources into that. And I don't know if that's something that they can just do
Again.
They can, like,
They got money.
does Warner Brothers want to do that every year is the question. Like DC, they can do that, but like, they're certainly getting the check from, on high. So like, but I feel like it's one of those things where, not necessarily like it should be a thing that Marvel and DC do every year, but it should be a thing that I think if people looked at the Milestone Initiative and the results of it, like, it does yield something. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, we found one person out of like 20. It was like, we found like almost 10 people. Like, almost half of the group is actively working in the comics industry right now. So like, that's a pretty good number. And I think if you continue to kind of push that, like, there's so much untapped potential and so many like talented storytellers that have the ability to do it, at that level. Like, I think that oftentimes, the unknown is very scary for a publisher, right? Like, they don't want to say, oh, let's give this person, whatever, a Nightcrawler series, and it's like, oh, they can't do it, they can't finish it, like, they want a proven commodity to a certain extent. But at the same time, like, you're never going to get a new generation if you don't invest in it. And so I feel like, DC did the right thing, and that was also, on the strength of Dennis and Reggie, kind of pushing for that. But, I don't know. I don't make the calls. If it was up to me, we'd be doing that all the time. But, I feel like it's one of those things where I would say it's a success. I don't really know generally from the DC perspective how it's viewed, but I would hope they also think it's a success. I mean, they hired a bunch of us, so.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's been having a good effect on the career, because you said people noticed, the retailers noticed you in San Diego, and there's 11 people in San Diego. It's hard to see anybody.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the comic book business overall right now? The industry, in terms of, you're out here,
Yeah.
you're pushing a book, you're putting a new book out,
Yeah.
you're also still actively trying to get work, but the whole year turned up on end. Distributors died and crumbled, and things that spitter off. They canceling books off of tweets. Are you positive about comic books right now, or are you apprehensive?
Yeah, well, I mean, in my mind, I always divide it up of like, there's the comic book business, and then there's like comics, like the community and the culture, right? So like the comic book business is always going to be a business, and they're always going to do what's best for business. And so like, depending on the mood and the temperature of things, like sometimes it's like, yeah, let's do something crazy, and sometimes it's like, let's just sell these books, you know what I mean? So like, it kind of ebbs and flows in that way. But I think, the community and, the level of creative talent that's out there it's high. I mean, there's a lot of people who I'm just blown away by, like, what they're able to do, whether it's in, more mainstream spaces, or, I was at SPX a few weeks ago, and like just walking around, I was like, damn, like, the kids that are coming up are doing crazy stuff, but then the people that you've known for a long time, like, they're still producing at a high level too. So, I think that there's always room for improvement. I think the business in and of itself, there's ways and spaces that like could be created that kind of, not even just open up doors for newer creators to come in, but just the sustainability of like, if you're trying to do this for a living, you know what I mean? Like, all creative endeavors can be difficult in that way, but having comics be a place that like, it's always the thing, right? Like, when you have people who come from the publishing world into comics, and they're like, you do it like this? Because that's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, never do that. And I think, comics, because it is such an insular business, like, there's things that are predatory that people are allowed to get away with because people aren't really like watching what's happening, and then places go bankrupt, and like people lose rights to stuff, and like it's a whole situation. And even now with Diamond, it's like everybody's suing them. Who knows who's going to get money from any of that? But and as a community, as an art form, like obviously, whether it's if you take it all into consideration, both manga and webtoons and YA stuff and like mainstream comics, like I feel like we're going up. Like there's a lot of interest in it. It's just a matter of are we able to solidify people's interest in a way that like specifically in America, right? Because if you go to Europe, like comics are just everybody reads comics. Like it's not a weird thing to do. If you go to Japan or Korea, like everybody's got manga. Like it's not strange. It's not like out of place. Or as America, there's still that idea of like, well, that's not for me. Oh, that's not for adults, or that's not for like, even again when you think about just across the spectrum, Fantom. You guys do a great job of like welcoming people in, and like everybody who comes in here feels like they have a space and they belong to it. But unfortunately, not every shop is like that. So some people might say, "Oh, I tried it. I went into a shop one time and like I didn't like the vibe.
Yeah, nobody paid attention.
Yeah, and then I left and I didn't explore it further. And so again, like continuing to create spaces that are welcoming to people, so that more people want to come in and see what's going on. Because I feel like comics has a lot to offer people, but it is a matter of like from a business perspective, how do you do that in a way that's equitable, for both creators and publishers and comic book shops, but then also how do you do it in a way that like continues to grow the business? Because like if we just rely on dude who comes in and buys like every variant cover of Spawn, to like keep the business going, like that guy ain't going to be around forever. You want to continue to have newer people coming in and being a part of comics, both from a creative standpoint and both from a business standpoint.
So, publicly, what you could talk about? What's next? What's next for you, Jordan?
So I've got a few pitches out there that I'm working on that are in different stages of things. I feel like what I can talk about is 2 projects that I'm trying to put together currently. One is called A Black Person's Guide to Time Travel, which is kind of like a green book for time travel.
Yeah. You can't go nowhere past maybe 1968. Maybe.
Well, so that's the idea though, right? Like that was the thought with the original green book was like, well, you can't go here, but you can go here. You know what I mean? There's little pockets throughout, and so what I'm trying to do is I've talked to a couple of different creators, and like kind of pitch them on the idea of if it's an anthology and you can pick like where would you like to go back to, what would you like to experience, what would you like to see. So like the conceit around it is it's a Black-owned time travel business in the future, where it's like you can come in and like pick from almost like a curated level of like, okay, so like do you want to go to because remember, like you said, you can't go back to 1960. You can go back to like the 1600s, the 1500s, like before there was slavery and all of this stuff. Like there was a time before, you can go back to
the
Africa.
Black Plague or something. You might get.
Well, I mean, like there's a lot of stuff going on.
True, you know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta be real specific.
You can go back to Egypt. You can go back to like a lot of different periods of time. So like, each story would be kind of like, oh, okay, we'd go chronologically. Basically, it's like, all right, we can go here and then like all the way up to wherever is the latest time that you'd like to travel back to. But there's a mix of like, all right, this happened for real, right? Like there's a story that I heard recently about a town in Texas back in the days of like the Old West, with like Billy the Kid and all the outlaws were growing around. It was an all black town, and like even Billy the Kid was like, I don't want to go there because they're gonna kick my ass. Like I don't want to try that. And like somebody did try it, and like literally the whole town came out and like stomped them out because they tried to rob the local bank, and they were like, "That's our money. Like we're not gonna let you do that." But then going to the other side of just like, things that we've heard rumors about, but we don't really know like what happened, and kind of like filling in the blanks of like, that. Let's just say like there was a story that you heard about Prince where it was like, well, I don't really know what happened, but like what if this did happen, and like what if you could go backstage and like see what was going on. So that's the first idea. So we're putting that together and trying to pitch that around. And then on the opposite side of that, it's another anthology that I want to do called Black Culture Handbook, which is basically just like, I'm very interested in why Black people do a lot of things that we do, and I know that they came from somewhere very specific. Like, I don't know why we play spades, but I know that's, like, that happened somewhere, you know, in time. Like, I know, like...
So, yeah, that's a lot of research, because that means you can do research bid whist.
Yeah.
And once you learn bid whist, then you understand how we got the spades.
Yeah.
Spades is the easiest way to bid whist. Bid whist for the grown folks.
But
see, right there, that's
yeah.
what you find out. That's a common way I sell.
Yeah.
Right there. That'd be fine.
And even just, like, you know, like, DAP came from, you know, Black soldiers in Vietnam, but just, like, the way that kind of transformed over time. So there's a lot of things that I'm like, why did we do that? Like, where did that come from? Why did that happen? And so it'd be...
How did it spread? Yeah, so how certain things spread.
Yeah, because it SAT word, it transmogrified, right? You know, as it kind of went from place to place. Like, some people did it like this in Atlanta, other people did it like this in LA, and other people did it like this in New York, but it's kind of the same idea and concept. So yeah, that's more of like a strictly nonfiction work, where it would be more just like, here's the history of it. I would like to have like cartoons and comics that like go along with it, that are more anecdotal of like, you know, I know roller skating became a thing because we couldn't swim in the pools, right? So we needed something else to do. And so like, you know, having somebody talk about, oh, like this is why I fell in love with roller skating, right? And like, here's a comic about that. So trying to like figure out a way to put that would probably be more like a Kickstarter thing that I did. But those are the two things that I'm like actively working on, and then other work that comes my way is also nice.
So I talked enough. Does anybody sitting in the audience want to ask Jordan questions?
Hey, since the concept for this character comes from work that you did on the Milestone Initiative, do you see this as a superhero comic?
In a way, like I've described it to people as dial H for Black people, or it's just like you're like.
I got Bixen vibes instead of animals. It's pulled from actual Black history.
Yeah, I mean, it has elements of that, you know, and like again, I would like to think that it would fit into what Milestone was doing back in the 90s. You know, it's not a traditional superhero book, you know, in the ways that like Melvin is not a traditional superhero. So like, there are certain elements of it that I do think fit. There's certain elements of it that are more, you know, science fiction leaning, but it certainly can fit within that genre. Like, if people were like, Melvin's a superhero, I wouldn't say you're wrong. You know, I would just be like, hey, he's a different kind of superhero than maybe you're used to seeing.
Yeah. Well, and kind of connected to that, I was wondering about when you're writing for single issues versus if you're writing it all as a graphic novel, because you've done, you know, stuff for Big Two before.
Yeah.
How do you feel like the writing for single issues affects the way that you write the story, versus if you were told to do the same story but it was all just one graphic novel?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge of single issues is one, like, you have to stop at a certain point that's like, I need to read what happens next. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't get next month's issue, like, it's going to drive me crazy trying to figure out what's going to happen. So, like, you're writing these cliffhangers that need to be, you know, evocative enough that, like, make people want to come back. As opposed to, like, if I was just writing this chapter by chapter, certainly I want you to read the next chapter. I want you to put the book down and walk away. But it doesn't need to be as, like, whoa, like something insane just happened. Like, it could be a little bit more of a gentle, you know, page turn from like one to the next to kind of lead you in. And it also, you know, opens things up where, you know, each issue is going to be 20 pages, right? Each chapter in a graphic novel doesn't need to be 20 pages. It could be, you know, 17, it could be 30 pages. You can kind of play it out like that. So, you know, I think if it was a graphic novel, there would have been a little bit more playing with time. Like, I may have had more space to include more historical figures. But I do think that, you know, writing it as single issues also, as a writer, gives you a different challenge that can, like, kind of, if I didn't do it this way, I don't know if it would be the same book. You know, like, certainly it would have changed, and maybe not in terms of tone, but definitely in terms of, like, the pacing for it. So I like both personally. Like if I could be Ed Brubaker and just like make graphic novels from now on, and like never have to write another single issue, like that would be great. But also like single issues are what people come to comic book shops for. So like figuring out the best way to do that, I think it's been a challenge, but it's been a good challenge.
Yeah, well, first I wanted to say that reading the first issue, when you included Jean-Louis Michel, I just thought that was neat because I'm half Haitian and I didn't know about him before. So
Yeah.
I went to Wikipedia, was reading his page, and I was like, oh, this guy's legit.
Yeah.
It's really neat. So I feel like you have really accomplished every character you kind of historical figure you add. I am intrigued by it. I think you've done I've just read the first two, but I think you've done a good job of picking intriguing figures.
Thank you.
My question is kind of, I guess it may be revealed in later issues, but we know that part of the story takes place in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of interesting how Melvin kind of is in the present drawing his power from the past, and we kind of have the sentient AI who is in the future but also kind of drawing power from the past, which is now currently the present. And I don't know if you kind of had I guess what was the motivation for kind of placing part of the story in the future, and is that kind of like a statement on where AI is going, or a statement on how kind of the systems that are against us kind of seem to be ahead of the curve? Like, what was kind of the thought process behind that?
Yeah, I think the best. I would like to not think this is a dystopian story, but like the best stories that do that, like the future isn't like, whoa, can you imagine? The future is like, we're almost there. It's like if you just like tilt the axis this way, I can kind of see it. And so in the future of this world, it's not like, oh, everything's like 100% different. It's like things are mostly the same. It's just that we've kind of acquiesced to this level of power, and I feel like there's definitely a warning in there, and that like again, I would encourage everybody to read Empire of AI because it is eye-opening just at the level of like resources that they have access to that not even they shouldn't have access to, but like nobody should have access to. Like another country's entire freshwater supply. Like it's like not good. But just like the way that we continue to kind of again like hoard resources, and like specific people get access to that, other people don't. Like the whole thing with the AI in this story is that like the people they're taking from the past are people that they assume like nobody's gonna miss that person. Like nobody's gonna miss the person who drops the bus, or like this person in the old folks home, or like these people living in the park, because like nobody cares about them now. So like if I just use them to do like these tests on, and maybe they die, like it's not going to affect the future, because like they weren't going to affect the future anyways. And I feel like that's a lot of the way that industry looks at most of us generally, but specifically minorities, and in the way that like we are disposable, in the scheme of the future, right? Like, I think it's like the Tribe Called Quest, was it the Space Program album?
You mean the last one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you think you're going to space? Like, you ain't, they're going to space, you still gonna be here, you gotta figure it out. And so,
I'm going to space.
But like wanting to kind of again incorporate that, where like the future, I feel like I've shifted over time as I got older from being an optimist to a pragmatist, of like I can still think a better world is possible, but also understanding like this is the world that we're living in now, and like these are the obstacles and challenges that we're facing, and so we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. And not just think, well, things are going to work out, because like people are actively working against our better interest, and like we need to actively work against that. And so I think there is a little bit of that connection that you were making, where like the past that Melvin is drawing from is one that is giving him power and kind of like helping him along his journey. the past that the AI is drawing from is specifically like what they view as expendable resources, right? And so like it's two ways of looking at what came before. Is like, is this something that you can draw power from and like, you know, spread that power around, or is this something that you can just use for your own gain and interest? Hello.
Hi. So we're in this, like, I don't know, I'm kind of scared of the world we're living in right now. Because you see on, for instance, on social media where we're doing these hauls with like some girl buying 100 t-shirts and then it's ending up on a beach in Ghana.
Yeah.
Or we see, you know, which also is using the data center energy and like spiraling out of control. Do you think there's a way for us to, as like little people in this room, to turn that around?
I think, you know, I think there's been a lot of conversation about community, you know, with people, and like people going both ways on it, where it's like, oh, like, you know, that's maybe not necessarily like insular thinking, but like, is that really going to be enough? And there's other people that are like, yeah, like that's how people have always gotten along. I think, you know, going back to what I was talking about earlier, they keep using the word inevitable, right? Like they keep saying like it's gonna happen, so you might as well just like get ready for it. Like don't fight it, just let it happen to you. And I think we always have a choice. And like I want to say, I forget who I was listening to talk, but they were talking about how you know, it was Ta-Nehisi Coates. Did you watch his interview with Ezra?
How can you not? Well, I listened to it before. I didn't watch it, but the little bit I saw, his facial expression.
Yeah, he said something that was poignant, which was like, there are a lot of people who lived through these times with the understanding like they might not see a better tomorrow. Like the work that they do may not pay off in their lifetime, but it wasn't work that wasn't worth doing. You know what I mean? Like it still meant something. It could still mean something to generations that come down the line. And I think we collectively have an obligation to, you know, a world that we won't see, you know, in terms of like trying to make things better. You know, also understanding that like maybe it's not gonna be better, you know, before we move on, but like it's still work worth doing, and there's still work to do in the community, right? Like even earlier this week, you know, I was looking around at different like, you know, community fridges and pantries and things. You know, I live in Baltimore, and like, you know, people are actively doing that work. You know, people are actively trying to help each other. And I think even if you think what you're doing is small or like isn't having a larger impact, like impact what you can, like impact what you think is accessible to you. So like if you can just help the person who lives next door, if you know you've got like an elderly person that lives in your building that needs help getting their groceries up the stairs, help them. If you know that you have like you know, a school nearby that could use like extra volunteers to do after school activities, like help them, like help wherever you can, because I think all of that ultimately adds up in the end. But then there's other things like, you know, again, they keep saying it's inevitable, but like if we all went down to City Hall and we told them stop doing that, like collectively as a community, they'd probably stop doing that, because what they anticipate and hope for is that, well, you're too busy to pick up the phone and like give them a call, or you're too busy to like actually show up at the meeting where they're voting on, you know, the resources and the budgets, or you're too busy to actually like take the time out to like seek them out face to face. And whenever you do that, it's like, oh, okay, now I actually have to answer to you for real, like not just hypothetically. And so, you know, other people, I feel like, you know, I fall into spaces where it's like, you know, I'm not somebody who's actually like organizing things, but I know people who are, and like if I can help them in any way, you know, maybe I can't make it to the march, but like here's a case of water, you know, that I bought, and like take that with you down there. Or like, you know, I can't actively be there, but like I can help people get there, you know what I mean? Like there's different ways that you can always be involved at whatever level it is that you feel comfortable being involved.
I think we're done with the questions.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jordan.
Of course.
Thank you.
Superpower, Ancestral Recall 1 and 2. 3 comes out this Wednesday.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming out.
Yeah, if anyone wants to get their stuff signed, just make sure to pay for it up in the front. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Another one in
Those
the
are
books.
Yeah.
Another one in the books.
Thank you, guys.
And the store's still open if anyone's
Thank
trying to
you,
get anything
Julian.
else, too.
No problem.
Appreciate you, man.
Got me actually talking in front of people again. I was semi-retired.